In 1970, four European governments bet $2.4 billion on an airplane nobody wanted to buy. The A300. A twin-engine widebody. The market laughed. For 2 years, exactly 0 orders. 0. The consortium was bleeding cash, a political Frankenstein stitched together by France, Germany, the UK, and Spain. Boeing owned the skies. McDonnell Douglas was the muscle. Lockheed had the prestige. And Airbus had a factory floor, a prototype, and a ticking clock. Part 1, The Gamble. The problem was credibility. Airlines didn't trust a European plane. They said it was a government toy, a subsidy sponge, a joke. By 1977, Airbus had sold exactly 38 aircraft. Total. Boeing sold 1,400 727s in the same period. The gap wasn't a gap. It was a canyon. Then Frank Borman, the former astronaut running Eastern Airlines, walked into a room. He didn't want to buy an Airbus. He wanted to humiliate them. He offered a deal: loan us 4 A300s for 6 months. Free. If they fail, we send them back. If they work, we might order. It was an insult. It was also the only card Airbus had. Eastern Airlines flew those 4 planes on the New York-Miami route. The A300 burned 30% less fuel than the 727 it replaced. It was quieter. It carried more passengers. After 6 months, Borman didn't just order. He ordered 23 aircraft. That single deal, that desperate gamble, saved the company. By 1981, Airbus had 100 orders. The monopoly was cracked. But the founding was never clean. The politics were vicious. France wanted the lead. Germany wanted equal status. Britain threatened to pull out 3 times before the first bolt was tightened. The man holding it together was Henri Ziegler, a former French resistance fighter and the CEO of Sud Aviation. He had no aviation manufacturing experience. He had something better: political cunning. He negotiated the original partnership with a handshake in a Paris hotel room. The other architect was Roger Batil, a French engineer who designed the A300's wing. He was obsessive. He demanded the A300 use a supercritical wing design that Boeing had only tested on military jets. It gave the plane 15% better lift-to-drag ratio than anything in the sky. The name Airbus came from a French term for a short-haul commuter plane used in the 1960s. It was a generic word. They trademarked it anyway. The first flight was October 28, 1972. The A300 took off from Toulouse with a test crew of 4. It flew for 3 hours and 45 minutes. The landing gear retracted perfectly. The hydraulics held. The wing flexed exactly as predicted. The engineers cheered. The sales team wept. Because nobody called. Not a single airline. Pan Am said no. TWA said no. British Airways, a state-owned airline, refused to buy a European plane because it was too risky. Lufthansa, the German flag carrier, ordered 4 only after the German government threatened to cut its subsidies. It was a humiliation dressed as a launch. The A300 was a technical triumph and a commercial corpse. Part 2, The Breakthrough. But a crack wasn't a win. Airbus needed a weapon that didn't just compete. It had to dominate. Enter the A320. Launched in 1984, first flight 1987. This was not an evolution. It was a revolution. The A320 was the first airliner controlled by fly-by-wire technology. No direct mechanical cables from the pilot's yoke to the wings. Just electrical signals. A computer. A digital brain. Pilots hated the idea. They said it was unsafe. They said it was unproven. They said it was a toy. The man behind it was Bernard Ziegler, Henry's son. He was a test pilot with a PhD in aerodynamics. He had flown the Concorde. He had flown fighter jets. He believed the future was digital. He argued that mechanical controls were the bottleneck. A human pilot could only react in 200 milliseconds. A computer could react in 10. The computer could prevent stalls, prevent overspeed, prevent pilot error. Ziegler's team designed a system with 5 computers. 3 primary. 2 backup. If one failed, another took over. If all 5 failed, the plane reverted to a direct law that gave the pilot full authority but no stability augmentation. It was a safety net with a safety net. The pilot resistance was ferocious. The British Airline Pilots Association called it a danger to the traveling public. American pilots refused to train on it. Then came the crash. On June 26, 1988, an Air France A320 crashed into a forest during an air show at Mulhouse. 3 passengers died. The initial report blamed the pilot. But the investigation revealed the fly-by-wire system had actually prevented a worse disaster. The computer had limited the pilot's control inputs to prevent structural failure. It had saved the plane from breaking apart. The system worked. The narrative flipped. The cockpit redesign was the real killer feature. Airbus replaced the traditional yoke with a side-stick controller. A small joystick on the pilot's left, the co-pilot's right. It freed up space. It reduced fatigue. It allowed for a common type rating. A pilot trained on an A320 could fly an A330 or A340 with just 8 days of additional training. Boeing pilots needed 25 days to transition between the 737 and 757. The difference was staggering. In 1990, Northwest Airlines had pilots flying both the A320 and the 757. The A320 pilots logged 15% more flight hours per year because they spent less time in simulators. The cost savings were $2 million per pilot per year. Airlines noticed. By 1994, the A320 family had 1,200 orders. It was the best-selling narrowbody in history. Airbus hit 30% global market share. Boeing was officially in a fight. Part 3, The Dream. Success breeds ambition. Ambition breeds arrogance. In 2000, Airbus announced the A380. A double-decker, 4-engine superjumbo. Capacity, 853 passengers. Price tag, $25 billion. The goal was simple: kill the Boeing 747. The 747 had ruled long-haul for 30 years. Airbus wanted to build a flying ocean liner. The logic was hubris dressed as vision. They believed airports would choke on congestion. They believed airlines needed a single giant plane instead of many smaller ones. They were wrong. The A380 was a masterpiece of engineering. The wingspan was 262 feet. The tail height was 80 feet. The cabin was 50% larger than the 747. It had a bar, a shower, a gym in first class. It was so wide that the upper deck had a separate staircase. The engines were the Rolls-Royce Trent 900, each producing 70,000 pounds of thrust. The plane could take off from a runway shorter than the 747 needed. It was quieter. It was smoother. It was a cathedral in the sky. The logistics were a nightmare. The wings were built in Broughton, Wales. The fuselage sections in Hamburg, Germany. The tail in Getafe, Spain. The cockpit in Saint-Nazaire, France. The final assembly in Toulouse, France. Every part had to be moved by barge, truck, and a specially built cargo plane called the Beluga. The Beluga was an A300 modified with a bulbous fuselage that could swallow an entire wing section. It flew 3,000 hours per year just moving parts. The barges traveled 1,500 miles from Hamburg to Toulouse, passing through 18 locks on the Rhine River. The trucks carried sections that were 40 feet wide, requiring police escorts and road closures. The entire supply chain was a Rube Goldberg machine held together by duct tape and European bureaucracy. Part 4, the hubris. The delay was 2 years. The cost overrun was $6 billion. The problem was coordination. French engineers used CADIA, a 3D design software developed by Dassault Systems. German engineers used a different system called CADM, an IBM product. The two systems did not talk to each other. The French designed the wiring harnesses in CADIA. The Germans designed the fuselage in CADM. When the harnesses arrived in Toulouse, they were 10 inches too short. Not one harness. All 98,000 of them. 500 miles of cable. Every single wire was wrong. The root cause was a measurement mismatch. The French used metric. The Germans used a mix of metric and imperial. The French assumed the Germans were using pure metric. The Germans assumed the French had accounted for the imperial tolerances. Neither checked. The result was a production shutdown that lasted 18 months. Airbus had to hire 1,000 temporary workers to rewire every plane by hand. The cost was $2 billion in rework alone. The first delivery, originally scheduled for 2006, slipped to 2007. Then to 2008. Airlines who ordered the A380 were furious. Singapore Airlines, the launch customer, had to cancel routes. Qantas delayed its entire fleet plan. Lufthansa took delivery of its first A380 in 2010, 3 years late. Emirates was the only airline that loved the plane. It ordered 123 of the 251 ever built. But everyone else walked. Air France ordered 12, then cancelled 2. Malaysia Airlines ordered 6, then cancelled 2. Virgin Atlantic ordered 6, then cancelled all of them. The market had shifted. Airlines wanted point-to-point routes, not hub-and-spoke monsters. They wanted the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, a carbon fiber, fuel-efficient twin-jet that could fly 8,000 miles with 250 passengers. The A380 needed 500 passengers just to break even. It never did. Only 251 A380s were ever built. 14 airlines bought it. Production ended in 2021. The $25 billion bet returned maybe $15 billion. It was the most expensive commercial failure in aviation history. But here is the twist. Airbus survived. Not because of the A380. But despite it. Part 5, the comeback. While the A380 was bleeding money, Airbus was quietly building the A350. First Flight 2013. Carbon fiber fuselage. Rolls-Royce engines. 25% better fuel efficiency than the 747. It beat the Boeing 787 on range by 1,500 nautical miles. It beat it on cargo capacity. It beat it on passenger comfort. Airlines noticed. By 2018, the A350 had 900 orders. The 787 had 1,400. But then Boeing made a fatal mistake. March 2019. 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes. 346 dead. The entire MAX fleet grounded worldwide. Boeing's reputation collapsed. Its production halted. Its order book emptied. Airbus did not gloat. They just kept building. In 2023, Airbus delivered 735 aircraft. Boeing delivered 528. For the first time in history, Airbus was the world's largest aerospace manufacturer. The European consortium that started with 0 orders and a $2.4 billion gamble had beaten the American monopoly. The A350's success was not just technical. It was strategic. Airbus learned from the A380. They used a single CAD system across all factories. They sourced the carbon fiber fuselage from a single supplier in Japan. They kept the cockpit common with the A320, so pilots could transition in 10 days. The plane entered service on time and on budget. The first customer, Qatar Airways, ordered 80. Then came a dispute. Qatar claimed the A350's paint was peeling due to a design flaw. Airbus argued it was a cosmetic issue. The dispute went to court. Qatar grounded 21 A350s. Airbus cancelled a $6 billion order for A321s. It was ugly. But it was not fatal. The A350 kept selling. The pandemic was the real test. In 2020, global air travel dropped 66%. Airbus lost $1.3 billion. Boeing lost $12 billion. Airbus cut production by 40%. Boeing cut by 60%. Airbus kept its supply chain intact. Boeing had to shut down its 787 line for 18 months. When the recovery came in 2022, Airbus was ready. Delta Air Lines, a lifelong Boeing customer, ordered 100 A321neos in 2022. It was Delta's first ever Airbus order. The plane was delivered in 2023. It burned 20% less fuel than the 757 it replaced. Delta ordered 100 more in 2024. The lesson is brutal. Airbus succeeded not because of the A380, but despite it. The real weapon was the A320 family. A simple, reliable, fly-by-wire machine that turned airlines into repeat customers. The A380 was a monument to ego. The A320 was a machine for profit. One bankrupted the company's pride. The other saved its future. In 1970, four European governments bet $2.4 billion on an airplane nobody wanted to buy. In 2023, that airplane's great-grandson crossed the Atlantic with 180 passengers, burning 30% less fuel than the plane it replaced. The monopoly is dead. The empire is built.